One of the stories that was told over and over again is a group of young women, 18, 19, 20 years old, went to go see Mahaley and to have her read for them. They were from Atlanta. And one of the girls, Mahaley, said, "Oh, sorry, darling, I can't read for you. I can't read for you." And so the girl goes back out. Her friends come in, and they get Mahaley reads for her friends, and her friends are like, "Miss Mahaley, why wouldn't you read for our friend?" And Miss Mahaley goes, "Because your friend doesn't have any future to read." That's what she said. Your Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Esoteric Atlanta. I am joined today with my friend, Esoteric Athens. No, I'm just kidding. My friend, the Pickle Chickle, Angie Tillman. I will be putting her channel links, as always, down in the description box below. How you doing today, Angie? We've been chatting for a while off screen, but
yeah, we have. I mean, pretty funny stuff that shall remain chatted about right here.
Private conversation.
I want to know about your glasses.
Girl, well, I've had glasses for a while. I just don't wear them. I've been very reluctant to wear them. I know as an RH negative, we have astigmatism, as they say. But I've recently learned that it's not astigmatism. It's the fact that I'm RH negative, and the back of my eye, that's unseen back of your eye, like in the eye, is shaped
different shape.
Different shape with your if you're RH negative. That's why a lot of RH negatives have the propensities to see things others don't, to like see ghosts, see UFOs, all that kind of stuff, because our eyes are shaped differently, so we take in light differently. And if you guys know, if you have an astigmatism, so a lot of us RH negatives get diagnosed with astigmatism because we see light differently, but it's actually not astigmatism. However, as I've gotten into my 40s, I have noticed it is a whole lot easier for me to look at my notes and to read with the glasses on, especially with the big light right here. So astigmatism or no astigmatism, when I do my deep dives, I don't wear my glasses because I have it all and this is kind of a deep dive, but we're doing it a little bit differently. Normally when I shoot by myself, I've got everything organized, so I don't need my glasses to see. I'm just staring at the green light in the monitor. But since we're going to be, I learned about this person a while ago, and she's kind of been sitting in the back of my head. And Angie, I was thinking about, like, when I first opened my channel, before I went super conspiratorial, and which has been fun, I really wanted to focus a lot. There's two sides to the South. I always say this all the time. They're really like two sides to the South. You've got one side which is super fundamentalist, like very strict conservative, and then you've got another side to the South that's very eccentric. We think
it kind of reminds me of the family I married into. There's like really, really conservative, and then really, really, I'll just say fun.
Fun. And I always say I laugh, and that's why I opened my channel, because I wouldn't want to be from anywhere else in the world. I've luckily been very blessed. I've traveled the world. I've lived in multiple countries. There is nothing quite as potent as the Southeastern United States. There is just this personality that exists here, and every Southerner watching right now, you know what I'm talking about. When we talk about the eccentric side of the United States, like one of the biggest books in our modern history that's come out of the South is Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, right? Which takes place in Savannah. It's based on a true story. And in the beginning, they show this in the movie as well. They talk about the man who walks the ghost dog every day. That's not weird in the South.
No.
That's normal. That's
like you talking about my owls all the time. I mean, some people believe it. Some people think, oh, you want to believe those things, Angie. You want to believe that owl is like warning you, but
that's the South, y'all. That's what we're all a little witchy down here in the South. We are, especially the women. I always laugh. I say, if you come from the eccentric side of the South, which I consider my family to be the eccentric side of the South, you go to church on Sunday, but on Sunday evening, you're practicing some voodoo. your
Because
neighbor.
you learned so much gossip at church.
Yes.
So then you're home that night going, mm-hmm. Well, now we've got like the Facebooks, so we can go and like look
Well,
at
you love Jesus, but you also know how to crush some herbs and do some spells. Like
uh-huh.
that's the South, right? And, like I always laugh, like in the eccentric side of the South, like we went to church every Sunday, but my mama was the first person to tell me a ghost story. So you can't tell me that all the people in the South believe you either go to heaven or hell when you die, when everybody's fucking house is haunted. Like, that's just how it is. We talked about the werewolf of Georgia, which Angie and I did, which is going to be kind of near where the location of the story we're going to talk about today. You've got again the hoodoo, the voodoo. You've got that combination of the Native Americans. You have it's so humid down here that the air kind of breathes, which I think adds to that mysticism. It's a very mystical place to live. And so that's kind of when I first opened my channel, that was kind of the direction I was going, was to really show that side of the South, which is that culture. And again, if you're from the South, you know what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Everybody's grandmama had a deck of tarot cards hidden somewhere in that house.
Yes.
It only came out when the church ladies weren't there, right?
Right.
My favorite story from my mother, because my mother's family is from Charleston, South Carolina, and they're like, I say they're more witchy than my dad's side, but my grandmama, my dad's mama, I think she had, she was the one that hid books on reincarnation under the bed for my grandfather. And before she died, she really wanted me to know. Oh, I'll tell you this, guys, before we get started, because my grandmama, my dad's mom is from South Georgia, Quitman, Georgia. Very small town outside of Valdosta.
They have a festival every year called the Skillet Festival. And one time I was a celebrity judge of a food competition.
Well, Angie, I found out you and I should go together to this town because my grandmama, I'm not going to say her maiden name because I don't know much about her family. And actually, let's open with my grandmama because there's some correlations between the story we're going to tell today. She's my only relative. She's my only direct quote unquote ancestor who's actually from Georgia. My dad's dad is from Knoxville, Tennessee. He's Appalachia. And my mom's family is from the Low Country. They're all from the coast of South Carolina. My grandmother, though, was from Quitman, Georgia. And her family, I won't say her last name because I think I got some extended cousins down there. And I don't want to dox them. This is a very small town. Her last name was said a certain way that sounded very English, but was spelled very French. And she grew up on a dairy farm down in Quitman. She made sure to tell me before she died. I don't know why she wanted to tell me this, but she wanted me to know, out of all the grandkids, I was the only one she told this to, that her family came up from New Orleans. That's how they got to South Georgia, which makes sense that they came up from New Orleans. And I kept thinking, okay, interesting. Like, why didn't you tell us this when we were younger?
They came up from New Orleans. I love it.
Yeah, up New Orleans to dairy farm. And she goes, look at the spelling. We're French. You're French from my side. And I've been thinking about that a lot. She died a few years ago. And I've been thinking about that a lot. I'm like, was she telling me she was a witch? Like, what was she telling me? But I decided, because I'm going to tell you, and we're going to open with this story because this is going to have a lot to do with Mayhayley Lancaster as far as my perception of Mahaley. My grandmother's family, I don't know. I know she had her dad, my great-grandfather, his name was Paul. I won't say his last name. And I know he had a brother named Spencer that everyone called Spence. Now, I believe he had some sisters, but it could have been his aunts that my grandmother was referring to when I get to this story. But anyway, before we get to her aunts, I'm going to tell you guys, I decided, since I don't know much about her family, I know so much about my mom's side of the family, but I don't know much about my dad's side. So I decided to do a little digging into my grandmother in South Georgia because of what she really wanted me to understand. There was something I needed to know. I already knew they were very prominent in Quitman. I knew that they were very wealthy. I knew that they were all a bunch of attorneys. Mm-hmm. So I went down the rabbit hole and I found my great-great-grandfather, which would have been my grandmother's grandfather. His name was Stanley.
I've done a little bit of history about your family too, and it's upstairs, but I don't know, when we first started filming together,
Which side? The equipment side?
Yes, because I did. I need to go dig it back out again, but I knew about the Stanley part. I've got them in my family too. But anyway, go ahead.
Stanley haunts. Well, apparently they were very prominent. Everybody knew who these people were. Like they're legends in Quitman, Georgia, which isn't saying much. Quitman is what, like a stoplight? Like that's about it. But they're like
It's kind of like isn't it kind of in between? Like it's Thomasville. It's right outside of Thomasville and then Valdosta. Yes.
Yes. Like the biggest
like a straight line.
Yeah, it's like a straight line right across, right above Florida, right above the Florida state line. If you lived in Quitman, your big city to go to the grocery store would be Valdosta, basically. Like you're basically 15 minutes from Valdosta. But my great-great-grandfather haunts a building in Quitman.
Yeah.
There are ghost stories. I found them on YouTube of this guy. He was a Freemason, a very high-ranking Freemason. I didn't know that. Apparently, I got a lot of Freemasonry in my family.
Apparently, I do too, because you just did a thing on Alexander the Great or something. And my grandma down in Sylvester, Georgia, she had a bedroom in the house that was just a spare room, and she had that big old, white paper that teachers would use, just cover a whole wall. And she had a whole wall covered with it. And she did so much family history that with a little pen, like it's that small handwriting, the whole thing was full. Like she traced us all the way back to Charlemagne, Alexander the Great and all. And I've heard like that he was like one of the first like Freemasons. Anyway,
that cult of
that has nothing to do with this story, but we've all got them in our families.
We've all got it. And so I thought, I was like cracking up laughing. I'm looking at all these YouTubes of these crazy stories about this Stanley, and I won't say his last name. Very prominent. They're all lawyers. All of them are big time attorneys down there. I think I still got some cousins who are down there as attorneys because the firm name is still in use. I don't know. That's why I don't want to say the last name because I don't want to like dox anyone accidentally. But I was like, I think I have a karmic duty to go down to Quitman and talk to my great-great-grandfather and send him on his way. He ain't gonna scare me. I'm your man. I think I need to go down there and like do some woo-woo stuff and be like, listen, Stanley, listen here, honey. I know you never knew me, but I'm your granddaughter's granddaughter. You
might have a place for us to stay.
Well, I mean, I already looked at hotels. There's like a Best Western. I mean,
oh, yeah. Well, that's true.
But I thought we should go. I mean, we should totally go down there and like
I'm inviting myself
because I don't want to do this. But I mean, and I don't think in Quitman, Georgia, with the eccentric colloquial culture, I don't think they would think that's weird if I just show up and be like, I'm his great-great-granddaughter.
Uh-huh.
I think I can move him along. My grandmother was Mary Ann. Well, and they probably all. So there's my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my grandmother grew up on a dairy farm. So he was the one kid in his family who wasn't an attorney. He ran a dairy farm. She lived on an old plantation house. I remember this because he died. My great-grandfather, my great-granddaddy Paul died when I was 4. And I remember him. I have like one memory of him sitting on a lazy boy. It was a beautiful I remember it was a big house. Now, of course, if I go there now, it's probably just going to look like an average size plantation house, like nothing, because when you're a kid. And I remember my dad's first cousin, who was my first cousin once removed. He was in between my age and my dad's age. And I remember he would play with me like on the stairs, like going up and down the stairs on our butts before we had iPhones and cell phones and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Anyway, apparently that dairy farm now has become like an actual manufacturing farm. Like they've actually made it. I guess when my grandmother and her sister sold it after my great grandfather died, they sold it. So I think I could probably just drive up there, knock on the door and be like, yeah, hello. I am Paul's great granddaughter. Anyway, but I was going to start this because there's a lot about Mayhayley Lancaster that actually does remind me of my dad's mom. And my dad's mom went to the house she met my grandfather is that she went to university. And at that age, you froze for a second. At that time, women did not go to university, right? That just was not common. But my grandmother really wanted to go to university, and she actually ended up getting her master's. Like she was she was pantsuit nation before Hillary Clinton stole that from her. Although my grandmother was a Republican. Well, my grandmother told me many years later. I remember I was home visiting from Los Angeles. This was after I was graduated from college, all that kind of stuff. Many years later, I remember standing in her kitchen with her at my grandparents' house, and she was telling me, like, recapping why she decided to go to university. I think she was kind of having some realizations. And she made a point in saying that all of her aunts were spinsters, that they never got married. And so as a child, growing up in Quitman, a very small town, she was very concerned that she would never meet anyone to marry. So that's why she wanted to go to university, so that she could actually meet someone.
To get her MRS degree.
Get her MRS degree, basically. And she did. She met my grandfather. He was in the military at that point. He was passing through the town where her college was, and she was at a house party, and she was playing the piano because she was a pianist. And he walked in and saw her, and he thought, that's the girl I'm going to marry. So it was a good thing she decided to do that, because none of us would be here today if that didn't happen. But all these years later, I was in her kitchen, and she said to me, she goes, Bryce, I realized something. I just realized something. She goes, I don't think my aunts were spinsters because they couldn't find a date in Quitman. I think they were lesbians.
Lesbians.
And it took her like 80 years to like that dawning, like, oh, they weren't spinsters because they couldn't find a man. They were spinsters because they didn't want a man.
Yeah. That's really funny. And that goes along with like the Mahaley story, we think.
Yeah. We think. Well, my grandmother's aunts also were in the suffrage, however you say it, movement, where the women would march for for my great aunts
and rights and the feminist movement.
To vote. They wanted to vote. Very highly educated women, which Mahaley was as well. Mahaley was in that movement too. Maybe she was one of my great aunts. I don't know. Just kidding, guys. But
they all kind of look the same back then, I guess, the way they dressed and stuff. But I mean, she looks very identical to some of the pictures of my ancestors. They're on the wall. One of them looks like, we always said, the Wicked Witch of the West from Wizard of Oz on the bicycle. That's kind of like,
they had that there. Well, it's the same time period. And so Mayhayley, who is Mayhayley Lancaster, guys? Well, she is known as the Oracle of Ages. So she was quite famous. She died in 1955. We're going to go into these dates. But looking back, I said to Angie as we signed on, and this, I don't know. I have no idea. It doesn't really matter. I don't care. But she never married. Her sister was also a spinster who lived with her. And when I look at pictures of her, I kind of was reminded of my grandmother's story about her great aunts who now she believes were probably lesbians. And I said that to Angie.
Some of the pictures of Mahaley actually look like my grandfather or something. I think she looks very kind of, masculine in a way.
My boyfriend said that at once. He goes, you keep going back in time and you see old pictures. You can't decide who's the grandmama, who's the grandfather. They both look the same. So grandmama had just as much facial hair as grandpa. So Mayhayley, let's go. So she is the Oracle of Ages. She was born Amanda Mayhayley Lancaster on October 18th, 1875. And again, she died on November 22nd, 1955. She was a lawyer. She, in fact, was the first female lawyer in the state of Georgia. She was a political activist, a midwife, a teacher, and most famously, an oracle. Now, something about Mayhayley is that, and I've covered the Children of the Call on this channel before, Mayhayley was born a child of the call. So this means that when she was born, the sac, the placenta, children sometimes come out, it's rare, still in the womb, in the sac.
Oh, I've never heard of that. Okay.
Call. And it is said, I will put that video in the description box, guys, that I covered before about this legend, that children who are born in the call are said to be very psychic and have very mystical abilities. So this would be true for Mayhayley. All right. Now, not only did she have quite a resume, so not only was she very active, she ran for a seat, I believe, in the Georgia Senate as the first woman. She didn't win. No, we weren't ready for that yet, but she was very active with women's rights. And she was very respected by the community, even though she was very eccentric and had this reputation of being very psychic.
And even though, like, she ran for the legislature, she was the first woman, well, in the state of Georgia to do that. Yeah. She didn't win, but a lot of her ideas went on to become a lot reality going on today. Yeah.
Even though she was a midwife, one thing she wanted for the state of Georgia was that any woman pregnant, regardless of their ability to pay, needed to have a doctor present. Mm-hmm. Like, she wanted medical care for all women. And I think about that because the bed that I slept in as a child, now, not the mattress. Now, if you guys see old Southern beds, old antique Southern beds are really high up. They're high. And the bed that I slept in, it was a queen size bed, very high up. I had to have stairs. You see the stairs to get up in the bed. Was the same bed that my grandmother, the one that I was just referring to, was born in. Different mattress.
I actually have a little stool that I step on to get in my bed.
My mom has one for her bed too. Like, that's very normal down here in the South to have really high beds. Like, that's a big thing. Have stairs to get up. So yeah, so at that point, women were mostly, from what I understand, giving birth at home. I believe my grandmother was born, my dad's mom, in the late 20s or early 30s. I don't know her exact birth, probably early 30s. I think my grandfather was late 20s. So even at that point, and my grandmother's family was a very prominent family. Children were being born at home. And so she wanted to make sure that these women that were very poor, that were, sharecroppers' wives or living in huts, were able to get access to give. And that's a very big thing. Like, that's something that's like mm-hmm. duh now, like absolutely duh now. So anyway, another thing about her is that she had to add to her eccentricity is that she always wore a military jacket, which people believed were her father's. Now, guys, I want you to think about it. I know military jackets are in vogue now, but this was like a proper military jacket in a time when women were wearing like long dresses.
Maybe that's why I thought she looked like my grandfather. But seriously, he was a little skinny guy. But anyway, yeah. Continue on. I just that just hit me. I was like, it was that picture. Yeah, it was that picture.
Yeah, women did not wear that, right? And she also, on top of that, had a glass eye. So she lost her eye as a child, and she had a glass eye, and so it added to this mystique of who she was. Now, she ended up becoming very. Even before her oracle abilities were starting to become popular, she herself was obviously very active in politics, very well educated. She was a teacher for a while too, all that kind of stuff. She was very famous, was doing very well for herself financially, but she spent her whole life living in a shack. Like, she literally lived in this one shack her whole life with her sister. Legend states that she was kind of paranoid about keeping her money on her. She had been robbed a few times. And so the bank would always get annoyed when she would come in because she would hide her money in the chicken coop before she could take it to deposit it. Like, this is before, obviously, credit cards, debit cards, all that kind of stuff. So the bank would come in and they get mad because Miss Mahaley would bring this money in and it would have to have chicken crap all over it. Would have to tell her, Miss Mahaley, you're going to have to clean off your money before you bring it in here, because she would hide it in the chicken coop. And I heard somebody say that it's still legend in this area that people still go and look and see if they can find any leftover money that she left, because when she did pass away, she was a very wealthy woman, very wealthy. So anyway, you guys, so where she is from is an area called Heard County, Georgia. Now, if you call your hometown by its county name, it's a small town.
Right, like here where I live, we say Oconee, but the county seat is Watkinsville.
Yeah.
We just say Oconee, which I hate that actually, because I love the little town of Watkinsville, but but it's starting to become like Watkinsville is getting more well known, but everybody around here just calls it Oconee. They're like, oh, you moved out to Oconee.
That's the county. And like, so I live in Atlanta. I would never say, oh, I'm from Fulton County. You say Atlanta, right? So it's a small town when it's just Heard County. Now, something very, and this is just so you guys know that this is about, let me see, I wrote it down here. Let me find it. So it's about 60 miles kind of southwest from Atlanta. It's very close to the Alabama border. Now, this is also known as the Trope Herd Corridor. Did you research this, Angie?
I didn't, but I do know about the area weather-wise. And I don't know if this is where you're going with this, but I've always thought it was so interesting that like LaGrange, if you watch the weather, just in the morning, get up, like turn on the news if you do that. And the weather, LaGrange, Georgia, which is right there.
There, yeah.
Yeah, is like always either, it's just weird. It'll be like all around LaGrange will have like all these different degrees, but then in LaGrange, it'll be completely different than anything else. It's really weird. Something's going on.
What's going on there? It's a corridor. So the Trope Herd Corridor, east to west, it's 120 miles or 193 kilometers for our friends who are watching from other countries. South to north, it's 70 miles or 113 kilometers. So this whole area is known as one of the biggest spots for paranormal and UFO activity.
I had no idea about that. I just knew about the weather.
It might have something to do with it. So this is close to our Werewolf of Georgia, which Angie and I covered. I'll put that in the description box below. So this is known for Bigfoot, Sasquatch, all sorts of stuff, UFO. But and this is small towns, isn't it, Angie? Like this is not. There's no LaGrange, Georgia is not that big, and it's
like my aunt. I mean, you could just say the road she lived on. Everybody knows. Everybody knew like where that is. Like it was just that was it. You didn't have to have the address. It was just like, oh yeah, I don't want to name her name, but
That's how it is. Like one of the people I listened to was saying how, this is mostly like back roads. Like it's still to this day, a lot of it is back roads. So this whole area is known for very eccentrically strange stuff, as we're talking about in the South. So even though this is and that's the funny thing about Mahaley too. Also, I love the name Mahaley. Like I think that's an incredible name. I couldn't.
I'm thinking, do I need to have another baby? Just because I love it.
I know, and I want to say, like, part of me is like, is this like some Native American lineage? I don't know, too. I mean, Lancaster was her last name. That's obviously a very English last name, but the name Mahaley is just such a pretty name. I think
I've never heard of it before, and the way it's spelled, Mayhayley, like with the Y. Yeah,
it's spelled Mahaley, Mahaley Lancaster, Miss Mahaley. So, anyway, so there were a couple. So she kind of was known in the area for being this oracle. And one thing I wanted to bring up too is not only was she this like extremely psychic oracle, like she was like really spot on. And we'll get into that with what and how she got so famous. She got really famous for her incredible psychic abilities, but she was also a churchgoer, the Methodist Church. Every Sunday she was a very devout Christian on top of that, which a lot of the stuff I read about her, people were very shocked about that, like how she was at church every Sunday and she had dogs. She loved dogs. She had a herd of dogs with her all the time. And those dogs followed her around town everywhere she went. They even went to church with her on Sunday, which again, I'm telling you guys, like people from those Yankees, I know our viewers from other countries think we're all Yanks here in America, but no, Yankees in America, the Yanks, that's one specific part of the country. That's like New York, New England area. Anyway, that might seem strange to people outside of the Southwest, but that's not strange to me. Is that strange to you, Angie, that she was?
No, not at all. Not at all. And I read somewhere, I think, I saw that at where she's buried, she died, 1955? Yeah. But so where she's buried on her headstone, isn't there something that says, like, if you leave $1 for me and a dime for my dogs?
We're going to get into that. That's how much she charged for her readings.
Okay.
So she charged for a reading. She got $1.10, and when people would ask her, she'd say $1 for me, a dime for my dogs, and that was your payment for a reading. And when she would read for people, they said she would do this thing where she would spit, and spit in the fire and read the smoke. And some people said she would even, and I think she did this kind of to add to the entertainment value, is she would take her eye out, her fake eye out sometimes, and play with her eye while she was reading or smoke. Now, again, in the South, that's not weird. It's not weird for us to, I mean, that doesn't, people out the South would be like, oh, I can't believe she was a Christian and also an oracle. Darling, that's all of our grandmas. Like,
all of them.
You know, this is not a strange occurrence. This is just the South. All right. So now she became super famous. There were 2 Georgia cases, again, because she was a lawyer too, that made her very, very famous. Hold on, let me look through my notes here, guys. Got to get to the cases. The one was the Leo Frank case, which I believe I covered the Leo Frank case when I was doing the vampire of here in Atlanta, which I will place that down in the description box below. So basically, Leo was a superintendent of an Atlanta pencil factory, and at this point, this was before child labor laws. This was in 1913. Mary Fagan was a 13-year-old employee. Mary went to get her paycheck from the factory. She ended up being murdered. We won't get into the details of the case, but Leo Frank was convicted of her murder, although many people believed him to be wrongly convicted. He was then lynched by a crowd who kidnapped him from the jail. Now, this happened a lot down here in the South too, right? The people would just come get someone from a jail and lynch them. Now, people believed Leo Frank was Jewish, and so they believed it was spawned by some anti-Semitism, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. You know, obviously, we weren't there at the time, but it does look like Leo Frank had nothing to do with her. It does look that he was innocent. And at that time, Mahaley was one of the few people who supported his innocence at that time. The big one that got her famous and they've written a book about this, and they've made a movie about this, and Mayhayley Lancaster is in the story, and in the movie, Mayhayley Lancaster was played by Johnny Cash, his wife, played Mayhayley, and this was murder in Coweta County. All right, Coweta County is right beside Heard County. Now, what happened was, this happened in 1948, so about 7 years before Mahaley passed away. There was a man named John Wallace, and in the movie, Andy Griffith plays John Wallace, and he was
incredible. Like, we're talking about somebody that had all these like pretty big names play in this movie too. So
exactly. Well, the shocking thing was, so how this case became so popular. There were 2 big things that really stood out with this case. John Wallace ended up becoming the first white man in the state of Georgia to be convicted to the death penalty on the testimony of 2 black men. That's one thing. And also, John Wallace was very familiar with Mayhayley Lancaster and had used her a lot for her abilities. And he tried to use her to cover up his crime. Like, he would go check with her to see what people knew to cover up his crime. And so she ended up being a witness, which she was a very integral person. So basically what happened was John Wallace was this big, now all these counties, Coweta County, Heard County, Marietta County, all these counties are all kind of there together. So they all know each other. They all work in and out of each other, right?
Uh-huh.
So John Wallace was this big land owner, this powerful man. He called the shots in Marietta County, which is next to Coweta County. Now, John Wallace, as being a landowner, was also a sharecropper. He was also, my friends, we all got one of these in our family lines, a moonshiner.
Moonshine.
Angie, you want to tell our friends what moonshining is if they're not familiar with what this is?
I don't really know how to make it or anything, but most of us in the South, at least I always had this. When I was growing up, there was always like just a mason jar in the freezer, but it doesn't freeze. And that was the shine. And it was always made be like, sometimes they call it peach brandy, whatever it was, whatever the seasonal fruit was, they would use that. I think it tastes horrible.
It's awful. It is like the most potent alcohol. There is no drug out there that will ever compete to the intensity of moonshine. Now, moonshine, I believe, is still illegal to moonshine. They do it outside. They do all sorts of stuff to make it, and they sell it. They're bootleggers. They sell it. So John Wallace was also moonshining. And there was a man named, now John Wallace was not a very good guy. He controlled Marietta County. He was that wealthy, that rich, that he kind of called the shots. He controlled the police force. There was a guy named Wilson Turner. Turner worked for John Wallace, and where, again, John Wallace had unlimited power. Turner was moonshining for Wallace. Some say that Turner started working for other people on the side and got fired as a result. Others say that he took money from Wallace's house. So this is like, I guess moonshine, it would be like the equivalent of almost a mafia-esque, like it's kind of mafia, you know, I mean, this is highly illegal, guys, but it still happens. Like it's still open. It's like an open secret that this happens in the South.
Yeah, it's going on up in North Georgia for sure.
Oh yeah,
I've come walking with my dog up there, and I've come across some place, and I'm thinking, was it maybe meth going on or something?
Oh,
but I think it's moonshine. And
yeah.
my son has gone up there and fly fishing and just kind of following maps, not just kind of going on the natural, the what do they call it? Like the government forest. I can't think of the word of it right now.
National parks, yeah.
National parks, can't think of the word. And and he's come along, like he's come across like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. They're like, they've got their whole the steel.
They have to find a place
moonshine steel, that's it,
where they make this shit. So everybody knew John Wallace was making this. I mean, it's an open secret. It's illegal though, but it's an open secret. So there's many things. They either say that Wilson Turner, who was sharecropping from Wallace and helping him with the moonshine business, was either also working with other people on the side for more money, or was, anyway, something happened with money. John Wallace got mad and fired him. Wilson Turner decided to steal 2 of his cows. Wallace, he got arrested in Marietta County. They released him. They took him up to Carrollton, Georgia, and there's all this long. Anyway, they ended up accidentally killing him, and they killed him in public. Like it was, you saw. It wasn't like they shot him. Yeah. They thought they had crossed the county line into Marietta County, but they were still in Coweta County. If they had been in Marietta County, John Wallace would have walked free, but they were in Coweta County. Now, after everybody saw him shoot the man, he went and buried his body in a ditch, and then, because he's in Coweta County, now they got to find the body. So John Wallace was going to Mahaley so that she could tell him whether they could find the body. And she kept saying, yeah, they're going to find the body. So he ends up digging up the body, having his 2 employees, who are black men, dispose of the body. They ended up turning it into the cops. He was sent to the electric chair. It's a murder of Coweta County, guys. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. Johnny Cash plays the cop who gets him. Andy Griffith plays John Wallace. And June Coweta Cash, she plays Mayhayley Lancaster. And so Mahaley became very famous. This became a very famous case. And Mahaley kind of became the star of the case. Of course she did. It's like, this is Mahaley this is how we are in the South. They had eccentric, like, could you imagine the reporters from New York coming down, and they've got this woman with the glass eye and a military jacket, who's an oracle, but also a lawyer, and also, testifying. So all of a sudden, Mahaley becomes extremely famous all over the nation. People were driving, because this is that time, down dirt roads. They said that at this time, Mahaley, you would see the cars of that time, like lined up down these dirt roads, just waiting to get in to see Mahaley. One of the stories that was told over and over again is a group of young women, 18, 19, 20 years old, went to go see Mahaley and to have her read for them. They were from Atlanta. And one of the girls, Mahaley, said, "Oh, sorry, darling, I can't read for you. I can't read for you." And so the girl goes back out. Her friends come in, and they get Mahaley reads for her friends. And her friends were like, "Miss Mahaley, why wouldn't you read for our friend?" And Miss Mahaley goes, because your friend doesn't have any future to read. That's what she said. Your future, your future has no, your friend has no future. That night, the friend was in a car accident in Atlanta and died. She'd help people find lost wallets, like men who work out in the fields would come in. "Miss Mahaley, I've lost my wallet. I can't find it." She would read and tell them exactly where to find it. She had this thing too, where people would come when the lottery started happening, which has been a big struggle in Georgia because we're the Bible Belt. So do we want to gamble? Well, yes, we do. you'll say you don't believe in gambling, but you see your grandmama sitting in the back of that gas station playing those.
Right.
I don't know if other parts of the country have this. Scratching off, but some gas stations at the county roads have a back room, and you'll peep in through the curtain. You'll see these old ladies like playing like these. It's illegal, but they do it. And so Mahaley would tell people winning lottery numbers, and she said, if you win, you have to give me a portion of it. And so they would win, and they would come give her a portion of their winnings. And so at one point she got so famous she had to hire a bodyguard. So this woman she lived in a shack her whole life. She never purchased with her sister. She never purchased any land. She always just lived in this little hut. She had this bodyguard. And anyway, so her legend became so big that when she died, now her grave, and I am planning on going to her grave. It's only like 55 miles, 60 miles from Atlanta one day to see it. But they ended up having to restore her grave and this happens a lot to witch doctors too in the South. A lot of these famous witch doctors, they have like fake graves and they're buried somewhere else because people will come to the grave and try to take a piece of the body because they want the magic of the person. Mm-hmm. And this happened to Mahaley. When Mahaley's buried at the Methodist Church, like the Christian woman, she's buried at the church. But they had to eventually. Now, there is a rumor that they moved her body and her body's not there anymore. It's somewhere else. But there's also apparently a huge concrete slab now over where she's buried. So that they can't get to the body. I am planning on going to visit her, though, her grave.
Can I read real quick? I met somebody on Facebook, a new Facebook friend, and he wrote a poem about her. And you're talking about all this. I think it might be a good time to read it. His name is Joe Thrower. And I asked him if I could read it today on this. And he says, please do. It says, $1 for me and a dime for my dogs. She was born a bit different from what normal folks were, with a call on her face and a gift that was hers. Have you seen this before? An oracle of the ages, self-proclaimed, and could tell folks things that would happen they couldn't see. Mahaley lived with her sister Sally in a pack of dogs beneath the West Georgia pines midst an eerie, thick fog. After reading people's fortune and before they left through the fog, she'd say, $1 for me and a dime for my dogs. She made you feel nervous to look in her face, afraid she'd cast a spell that would be forever in place. She had one good eye and the other was bare, just an empty socket and a marble that glared. She wore an old army hat and stood tall as a man, then curse and scowl and curse again. Then after telling you of what's in store, she'd say, $1 for me and a dime for the dogs once more. Everyone heard about her famous reading of gloom that sent a Georgia farmer to meet his doom. Seems he killed his farmhand for stealing his cow, then went to Mahaley to see if the sheriff knew how. He buried his body to ashes and dumped them in a stream and hid his evil deed from the sheriff, it seemed. But justice in Mahaley finally prevailed, and the evil Georgia farmer was locked in the Coweta jail. They say if you're ever walking by Candy Road Church at night, I think this is where she's buried, and down through the graves in the pale moonlight, if no one's around and the wind is just right, even though you want to scream, you stand and be quiet. In the South we say quiet. So that's how it rhymes. You might hear a faint voice cursing as it pierces the wind. You know it's Mahaley with these words again. Stay as long as you like, but before you trip on a log, leave $1 for me and a dime for my dog. Isn't that good?
Will you send that to me? And who was the guy who wrote this?
His name is Joe Thrower. And I asked him, I said, did you write this poem? And he said, yes. And then he said, why, sure. I asked him, could we read it? Could I read it on the YouTube with you? And I told him the channel, and he says, why, sure. Maybe we could share royalties. So anyway, I thought you'd enjoy that. I just remembered, if you saw me looking down at my phone a lot, is because I just remembered that I had conversed with him and I had to look it up and I had to find it. I had to go through all these messages to find it again. But anyway, I thought it was so good.
And that's just, Mahaley is just, and maybe that's just Mahaley wanting us to tell her story again, because as time passes on. But this is just what makes the South so fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
It's stories like Mayhayley Lancaster. And I think all the women in the South, every woman I know who's from the South has a little bit of a Mahaley in her, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and she reminds me of my grandmother. My grandmother hid books on reincarnation, and she, was really into the spirituality, and she, being from Quitman, Georgia, I remember I asked my grandmother once how she got into meditating, because she found meditation before it was big in the United States, when no one was meditating. It was just an Eastern practice no one knew about. And my grandmother was like, well, when you grow up in South Georgia on a dairy farm, it's too hot. There's nothing to do but just sit and stare, and I think it's the land that kind of, it's the personality of the environment that we're in that also lends to these eccentric people, these characters. It's kind of like Howard Fenster, another one I covered him a long time ago when I first started my channel up in North Georgia. The artist that REM actually, he has his Paradise Gardens, which I've been to a lot. We had a lake house up there, so I used to go to his, these eccentric personalities. Howard Fenster was this great artist, folklorist artist, who created art out of junk. His Paradise Gardens was just trash, but it was incredible because it was all these sculptures, and you have all these just incredible characters that come from the South. And is it because there's like a corridor here? Is it because, I don't know what creates? Is it the fact that it's so damn hot that it pushes a certain personality out of people? And we always laugh in the South, we don't hide our crazy, we put it on the front porch and give it sweet tea. Like that's how we all know, I mean, I'm sure everybody watching this right now is like, oh yeah, this is a very typical Southern story. And the moonshine, we all know what moonshining is. We all know who moonshiners are. That's very normal. It's almost to be a moonshiner. That's kind of a respectable job, even though it's illegal. You got to have respect for the moonshiners, Yeah,
I kind of want my son to take me back to wherever that was, and I would be like, I'm not here to harm you. I just want to tell you.
I just want some of your moonshine. Angie's like, you want some pickles?
Yeah, exactly.
We trade.
We barter.
And we've got it's just such an incredible, I mean, that's the folklore and the legendary of the South. And so for you guys listening, if you are from the South or have any experiences with Mahaley, let me know. Let us know in the comment section below, because again, I'm going to try to head down there and see her grave at some point. And so anyway, Angie, is there anything you want to close out with today about Miss Mayhayley Lancaster?
Well, I can't think of anything else. I was really excited about that poem. I found that because I told you I didn't do enough research because I just had a crazy week. But that was just the thing that I thought was so good. But also in talking about witches, didn't you've said before that the word witch means wise woman. So there's a song by Jason Mraz, if y'all want to hear me read it. I can't sing it. But I think about it sometimes, and I'm like, oh my God, this is me. She's a green garden goddess, tender of the weed. She knows how to find it, grows everything she needs. She's a real wise woman with so much love to give. I'm so loving y'all. That's not what I'm trying to say. But there's so much here that's about kind of like Mahaley. She gives so much because she stays in touch with what her truest nature is. Because Mahaley did that whole political stuff and, an attorney, all those kind of things. So she kept it down to earth, but she was also kind of, in both places at once. She's a green garden goddess. She hears the universe. She's out there with the planet, but she keeps it down to earth because she's the wise woman. Okay. She's, let's see, where's the line? I thought it was, and I got so, let's see. Daughter of the sun, sister of the moon, mother to everyone. She's a wise woman. Anyway, it's a great song. And sometimes I listen to that whenever I'm told that I'm crazy or that I'm practicing witchcraft. I will play that song so dang loud and dance around in my kitchen and just say, hell yeah, I am.
Yeah, that's all of we're they say we're the granddaughters of the witches you didn't burn. I'm like, no, well, yeah, we are, but we're also Southern women. I can't tell you how many stories there are of how many Southern women learned tarot card from their grandmothers who were like head of the choir at the Baptist church. This is just a part of who we are down here in the South.
Yeah.
It is who we are.
Well, like her being the way she was and being that oracle and all, but still going to church every Sunday and being buried in the church.
And they say she knew that Bible. Now, of course, you guys know I have a different
right
Bible, but given the time period that she lived in, she knew that Bible inside out. She loved her some Jesus, and she was very respected. That you respected her. You didn't call her a witch. I'm sure she got called that occasionally, but you had, yes, Miss Mahaley, yes, ma'am, like, yes, Miss Mahaley. It's that respect there for her. And
I'm about to have this herbalist. Her name is Selena. I just met her Tuesday, she came over and she brought me some tomatillo sauce that she'd made. I mean, that didn't have anything to do with the herbs, but she is very, very educated and all. And when she was leaving, she said, "Bye, witch." I said, "Bye, witch." Like, but she's going to start coming on my channel and talking about what she does and, how to heal yourself with just with nature. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you guys let us know. Like, I've actually gotten in contact with a folklorist who's from the area. I can't wait for you to meet her too. She might be coming on my channel next week, guys. Let us know, because this is such an important part of our history, not just for Southerners, but as humans, we're very complex, and we have to remember these stories of people like Mahaley, because that's the truth of who we are as people. I think we all have the touch of the witch in us, and that's not a bad thing. That's us being in touch with, in tune with our nature and those around us. So anyway, you guys, all right.
Yeah, and right now, like Halloween, Samhain, Day of the Dead and all that, the veil is thin, y'all. So
Yep. All right, you guys. Well, I'm going to have all of Angie's links down in the description box below. Again, let us know your thoughts and enjoy researching Mahaley. And we will talk to you soon.
It could be a part 2 because I'm not done. Like, I really wanted to look into it way more.
Let's do a part. Let's plan a part 2.
I haven't seen the movies, and I read that she was portrayed as being crazy in one of the movies, and I'm like, no.
And in the murder of Coweta County, she was just eccentric.
Okay.
I don't know any other movie that has her in it, but I'll have to look. But yeah, just eccentric. There's documentaries on her, all sorts of stuff. So she's let's keep her alive, because she's, I think we've all got a little bit of Mayhayley Lancaster in us, all of us.
Yeah.
So anyway, you guys, let us know, and we'll do this again.
She told him, "But you will die before that last child is born." Do you know that's exactly what happened? And without him even telling her what the problem was, she informed him where he would find his wallet. And Vernon, his dad, went back home, went to the exact location that Mahaley had said he would find the wallet, and there it was.